Welcome, everyone. I'm Lynn Verge, Executive Director of the Atwater Library. We've had a record high registration for this session, which we're very pleased about because there was short notice. The topic is Westmount Southeast, the proposal of the City of Westmount's consultants, the firm LeMay, for high-rise construction next to the Atwater Library and redevelopment of our area. LeMay's proposal was made public in late 2024. It was posted online for us to see in early December. Tomorrow, January 9th, is the deadline for the City of Westmount's online forum for citizens to comment. Atwater Library leaders are disappointed in and alarmed by the LeMay proposal, in the sense that our building and our role as a community hub has not been properly recognized. We've written the City of Westmount's Director of Urban Planning, offering to contribute to a new planning process for human scale redevelopment that complements the Atwater Library. And so that members of our community are better informed about what's at stake and have a chance to fill out Westmount's online form by tomorrow's deadline, we are hosting this session with two esteemed experts. Dinu Bumbaru is the longtime and renowned Héritage Montréal Policy Director. Julia Gersovitz is an international leader in conservation architecture and the former chair of Westmount's Planning Advisory Committee, known as PAC. I invite the audience to look at the Zoom chat. At the top of the chat, we have the link for Westmount's online forum. During the presentation, please type in your questions. After our experts finish their opening remarks, there'll be a generous amount of time for Q&A. I will serve as moderator, and I'll direct everyone to the Zoom chat and go through audience questions in the order in which they appear. The audience will be muted throughout. Now, I invite Dinu Bumbaru to lead off. Over to you, Dinu.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. Good lunchtime to everyone. Thanks for attending, and thank you very much for the Atwater Library for organizing this session. It's very important that in a planning exercise of that nature, there is a shared knowledge. And even though the City of Westmount has obviously made some effort in enhancing the process, which could be very bureaucratic or technical, to engage with discussion, this civic initiative of the library is very important. I'll raise a little example about the role of library first, and my focus will be on the Atwater Library as a heritage institution and heritage building asset in the context of that boundary site, boundary area. It's right on the edge of Westmount and Montreal, and there are lessons to be learned from such situation. A few days ago, the Financial Times circulated an article about the Johannesburg City Library. And it was a very, very interesting article. If you have a chance to read it, you will read a lot of the DNA of our discussion now, is how you have a library which is more than books. It's actually a city services, a social service, and a place of welcoming and learning, can play a role in a revitalization, or when it's not treated properly, in the devitalization of an area, like a downtown sector, like the one we're talking here. So this is an example from far away, but it's worth to keep in mind the importance presence of the Atwater Library, both visual and social, in terms of accessibility. You can keep the library as an artifact, but it won't be the library that our society welcomes and uses. This year is happens to be the 20th anniversary of the designation of Mount Royal by the Quebec government, and this results for a careless approach to the development of site on the edge of Westmount. It's the old Army headquarters on Atwater Street, a bit further up. There was a big battle. I don't want to go into detail, but we had to go to get the authority of the Quebec government to protect the mountain because the city of Montreal was interested only in its own greedy interest in those days. That was in the 1990s. And now there is a process to, and with the mountain, one of the main issue now is the iconic presence. Again, like the library is how something exists in its surrounding, in its community. The mountain, it's a big discussion, and the city of Montreal is struggling with ways to avoid that concept by limiting the planning measures to specific views and specific angles. And you can see a bit of an echo of the situation of Mount Royal as a whole in its setting versus the situation of the library with the current angle provided for the scheme that the southeast plan that the city of Westmount is considering now. Looking at the perimeter that is being examined by the city for this planning exercise, one thing comes to striking to me is how they use the middle line of Dorchester as the boundary. And perhaps that's something to challenge. The natural boundary there would be the railways, so to include a diverse set of situations, but mostly to understand the rearrangement or the requalification of Dorchester by the development or the building of these vacant lot and parkings with the double side mindset. Not the double face, but the two sides of the city in consideration, not just the northern side, which seems to be the case right now. And that's something which the boundary is very important. I mean, we've seen how the city of Montreal has developed the site of the Children's Hospital. It's the city of Montreal's, although there is a little section that deals with the Westmount Authority, but the city of Montreal essentially released the building heights on that site under expectation that were not always met by the developer. And that's a warning that should be said. There's a lot of effort in Montreal, as in other cities around the world, to combine program development, and you give a bonus in exchange of a community asset and so on. What is the reality of that deal? In the case of the children, the city was promised a tower of social housing. I don't know where it stands now, but it was for quite a few years a promise that had vanished. And we have to be careful about such promises, especially when you authorize heights, because the moment you authorize heights and density, then we end up with an acquired right, and it's the small prints get usually forgotten versus the land value and the speculative value of the height itself. In perhaps an element I would raise also is the effort to revitalize St. Catherine Street. St. Catherine Street in that area, and it's not just the Westmount section, the Montreal section also has had many years. Back in the 1990s, in the 80s, actually, there were strategies after strategies to revitalize this area. The loss of the Forum was impacting the transformation of this area, although there was some good thing that happened. The loss of all these car dealership on St. Catherine was a bit of an improvement, I would say, over the years. I'm not talking of the old Packard garage, which is netted now if it's still standing. But how do you revitalize a street like St. Catherine? Is it by height or by the neighborhood approach. Will people live in the area that is being planned for now, or will they actually transit through it? And there's a tendency to see, because of environmental concern, climate change, and so on, there's a tendency to say we have to densify the city. And unfortunately, we have to realize that the densification is something that is too often associated with high rise and not always with revitalization. And you stack up huge amount of floors, and you end up having an elevator life rather than a street life in the end, because most people living in those towers don't actually, go at the corner of, I don't know, René Lévesque and Mountain Street. There's quite a few high-rise up there. Is it really a living place? I mean, is it? And we have to think a bit further than just stacking up numbers and imagining an approach of neighborhood. Now, there's Lloyd Adler, who's been writing in the Guardian in England and in the Globe and Mail occasionally, has been in Toronto addressing this issue, and it very often is using Montreal as an example, where we have a traditional setting. We don't have to rebuild Victorian houses, but we can imagine the fabric of the various neighborhoods on Montreal Island, and the catalog of effective human scale density models we have around. And that's perhaps what should be the driving force. And I'll come back. I'll conclude on an international quote. And 20 years, I told you, it was the designation of Mount Royal, but it was also in 2005, we organized an international conference in Xi'an, China. And that's the place where you have the army of terracotta warrior, it's a well-known place and so on. And the theme of the conference was to protect the setting of heritage. You would have seen around the world as you travel, if you have a chance, you notice heritage building, very often there's an awkward construction next to it. And very often, just like we did in the 60s next to Notre Dame Basilica on Place d'Armes in Old Montreal, we built a tower that actually didn't remove a single ounce of the heritage matter of the basilica, but actually crushed it. And on the opening remark, the keynote was the director of heritage of the People's Republic of China, who was speaking to the Minister of Culture in the audience and many international experts. And one of the things he was lamenting about, and you have to imagine the context where you have a high-rank official lamenting about a side effect of the development policy of the People's Republic of China leadership. And he was lamenting about the sameness of Chinese city. And I think we have to, it's a warning to us about the sameness of the Montreal fabric in its development. It's not just Westmount. It's not, somehow there's a tendency to repeat a cookie cutter model of development, whereas specificity is perhaps an approach which it may take a little more time. It may be a little less sort of attractive for speculator, but in 25 years and 50 years, people will thank us for it. Thank you.
Julia Gersovitz.
Thank you, Lynn. Dinu, always fascinating to hear your thoughts. I wanted to say the following thing, that just before Christmas, I had the honor of joining a number of my confrères and consoeurs in writing a letter or an article that appeared in the Montreal Gazette. And the authors of the letter were Peter Trent, Karen Marks, Anne-Marie Adams, Roseanne Moss, Sophie Robitaille, Connor Sampson, and Samantha Hayes, and me. And really, I would urge you, if you would, to read the letter or the opinion piece, because I think it sums up pretty well what we're thinking. But for those of you who haven't stumbled across it or have the chance to read it, I'm just going to throw 3 words at you, and then I hope we'll start the discussion and listen to you asking questions. One word is reknit, and I think Dinu touched on that. We really need to see this area as having been ruptured from the fabric of the area below Dorchester. It needs that critical mass to itself be stable and to grow and to help establish a much larger quartier. So reknitting really means looking at the size and scale and typology and bringing that to north. The second word I'm going to use is families. I think it's critical for Westmount to have an area where new families can be encouraged. The density will, a slightly upscale density will allow families to come in, and the way in which the area will be designed, should be designed, will encourage families. Families are not, and this is not something I'm stating without backup, so I urge you to, if you're not convinced of this one sentence, go onto the internet and begin your own research. Families in high-rise buildings are not truly compatible. It may be summed up in Dinu's brilliant statement of an elevator life versus a street life, but you really don't get families encouraged into high-rise buildings. And the third word that I would use is the generic nature of the plan. And in the generic nature, we find the nub of why we are all sitting here today, which is that the Atwater Library seems to have been dissed and just left off to the side, surrounded by high-rise buildings, and really, if not literally crushed, shall we say, emotionally crushed by the proposed surroundings. It should be seen as one of the anchors of the whole site. It should be a driver in the composition, and it really hasn't been treated in that way. And that's why I would say to you that rather than getting really down into the dirty of what the area needs, we've been presented with a kind of generic plan. So those are my comments. They're short. Let's get down to hearing from you.
Well, thank you, Julia and Dinu. We're really grateful to both of you. Before I go to the Zoom chat, I want to remind all the attendees that to have your question raised and addressed, you need to type it into the Zoom chat. And so far, I only see one. Julia, what do you think is an appropriate way for the City of Westmount to recognize and involve the Atwater Library in the Southeast planning process?
Well, I think that there should be a discussion of what are the principal actors in the process. And without starting to make the list, one of the actors at the top of the list should be the Atwater Library. So I would say you should be interviewed early on in the process. You should be asked what you can contribute, asked how you can be enhanced, suggested how you can be enhanced. One of the things that's interesting about the Atwater Library that I find a fascinating opportunity is that, yes, you have a main entrance on Atwater, but you also have a significant entrance that you've spent a great deal of money to make accessible on Tupper. And once you have that entrance on Tupper, the question becomes, how do we bring the population into not only see the building as sitting on its property lines, but begin to create civic space so that the Atwater Library can extend itself into the very fabric of the quartier, of that sector of walkable housing.
Thank you. So now let's all look at the Zoom chat. At the very top is the link for Westmount's form for your comments. And you don't have to write an essay, just one sentence, just to register your concern for the Atwater Library or for the neighborhood as a whole. Toby Morantz is first. How is densification determined? Has the area around the metro station already met this requirement of densification?
The short answer is yes. The area around the metro station has already met the densification. There is a proposal as well sort of buried, and I don't mean it's necessarily buried, it may just not have been the focus, of putting a new 80-meter building on top of the Alexis Neon Plaza, which I imagine means that they've already been entering into discussions with the Alexis Neon Plaza, since it's a rare idea to suggest that on someone else's property without their permission. Even just the addition of an 80-meter building on Alexis Neon Plaza would meet all the density requirements. It's not necessary to densify the entire area. And as I say, I believe that the Atwater, the Children's Square, as it's called, is already fulfilled that requirement. Dinu?
Yes. Thank you, Julia, and thank you for giving us those 3 words that are very useful. Densification is a word that unfortunately is not so clear. It's been handled and very often manipulated. There is is it units per square meter? Is it floor? Is it square meter of built on top of, there's many ways to approach it. There is a general principle, which is sound, and Héritage Montréal has been pushing it since the days of Mark London in the 1980s. And it is that when we have a neighborhood, let's make the best use of it. And doesn't have to kill it by sort of inflating it with high rise and let's keep Dubai in Dubai, frankly, and Toronto in Toronto. But there is an issue of understanding what is about the purpose of densification is to make the best use of existing infrastructure, and that's sound. The fact that there is a metro station makes it a logical thing to try to have more people living to get access to that metro station. Is it true that we are going to help the housing crisis in Montreal by building more luxury houses and condo? Not true. Is it true that we're going to make a better use of the subway station by building towers that are in the range of price that don't make usually part of the daily life of people of means to access these towers? Somehow there's a problem of designing these things in a way that makes sense. And that's Julia might recall the words of Joe Baker in the when there was the first master plan done for Montreal, saying we have to spread the development so that revitalization is not just occurring around one elevator shaft or 2, but actually help us fill the voids we've got and the gaps we've got in the city, the reuse, the repurposed buildings that are valuable and would benefit, and do the extension of the accessibility that you're describing, Judy. I mean, this is a very interesting point. Creating walkable and human scale neighborhood is a worthy cause. But with respect to, and there are other comments in the chat that refer to PMAD. That's the Montreal Metropolitan Community overarching master plan that is currently under revision. So if you have a comment, you might be interested to send a little note to the CMM to make them ask them for clearer ways that they balance their goal of sound densification with their mission through the PMAD to preserve heritage and landscape, which is in the act that defines their mission. So I know I'm not giving you a number, but the problem with densification, we had an exchange with the McCord Museum some 2 years ago on the issue, and it was pretty clear by Richard Schirmer from McGill sort of mentioned that the way we use densification, unfortunately, it's an open market. There's no clear definition, and it's important that the authorities get something stable on that.
Margaret raises the question of what happened with the promise of a subsidized or affordable housing tower on the children's site. Do you have anything to add to what you've said already?
Well, I think that the answer is that the developer has balked at honoring his commitment. But I think if we spend time on that, we won't spend time on our project and our concerns.
Okay, next, Jim Richards raised PMAD, saying whenever City of Westmount representatives are asked about densification, they say they have no choice because of PMAD. Do you have anything to add, Dinu?
I think
Well,
we've said-
PMAD is, I've mentioned it already just to give an idea of what is PMAD. It's a plan that sets a series of parameters for the Montreal metropolitan community that extends from, let's say, Blainville to Chambly, from Saint-Eustache to Repentigny. So it's a large area, 82 municipalities. Then at the level of the island of Montreal, the schéma de développement, which is the scheme for the island, will have to be updated. And then the master plan of the municipality will have to be updated. So there is a general intent to improve density around public transit infrastructure. That's a general intent. The way it's done, it's not so clear that this is an argument that forces to build a 25-story tower on, next to the library.
Thank you.
Julia,
Julia.
Lynn, if I could just add something to that, which Karen Marks has certainly brought forward as an important point. The document that you're referring to makes reference to the fact that there are no requirements. The desires, shall we say, the opportunities to densify have to be balanced out against other issues that are also important: the heritage character of neighboring buildings, the traditional nature of or scale of the area in which development is happening. So it is not a hammer. And anyone at the city who is suggesting that it is a hammer has misunderstood the intent of the document. The document's intent is to densify, but not to crush. And I think that we have to understand that as well, and gently remind our council members that there may be a misunderstanding of what has been said.
That's a really, really important point. Thank you very much for being so clear. Michael is asking how concerned people who don't live in Westmount, who live in Shaughnessy Village or who live in other parts of the Montreal region, can effectively advocate for the Atwater Library. The Westmount online forum is not restricted to residents of Westmount, although there's a request for your postal code. And the lot at the McDonald's lot next to the Atwater Library on the corner of Atwater and St. Catherine is partly in Montreal. The boundary follows an old Sulpician land grant. So it's split. So presumably both municipalities would have to rezone to allow a 25-story needle tower to go on that corner lot. Do you have anything to add?
Okay, a bit like Julia said, well, we should focus on what can be done with this particular discussion. But indeed, these are open public processes. People fought so hard to get public consultation rights in our society that there shouldn't be a filter at the door. After that, people are ready to. There should be an analysis and comment and so on. But please feel welcome. For the Shaughnessy area, there has been a series of public consultation for the planning, the development of the area. And also there is a table de concertation des Grands Jardins. The name of Grand Jardin was granted to that area for some reason, which relates to the history of the place. And it would be very, I hope they are informed of this situation and engage in making their own comment, because they've been very successful in balancing things in the Grand Jardin area.
Okay, Louise is asking about Resilience Montreal, which is now occupying the McDonald's building. They've bought the Roundtree Antiques building down the hill, further south on Atwater. Vonda says, please know that those who join later. Oh, okay. So the link for the City of Westmount form is at the top of the Zoom chat. And our IT manager has entered it 2 or 3 more times. If anyone has any need for clarification later, just email me. Michael, what do we know about the physical dangers to our building, the Atwater Library building, of the construction of a 25-story tower as LeMay is proposing very close by?
I don't think that we could answer that at this time, except to say that, generally speaking, I think that that's a very important concern for you as the owners of the building, and for those of you who use it on a regular basis, of course. But I don't think any of us can really speak to that today, neither Dinu nor I. The actual physical worries about it.
Yeah, this is not an engineering symposium, actually, but I would mention that following the cases of the Mount Stephen Club and the Église du Jésus on Blurry Street, Héritage Montréal's member adopted a General Assembly resolution on that specific issue, and sort of calling for the authority to be very serious about it, because the way protection of a heritage building is usually treated is from an architectural point of view, and we forget the risks that are caused by building happening next to it. And so it's
always essential to be mindful of this.
Yes.
And as Dinu has said, there have been some tragic examples of what happens when you are not mindful.
And I can tell everyone that the Atwater Library's construction manager has warned us that our foundation is vulnerable to an upset in the water table that might happen, and it could take years after the deep excavation required for underground parking for a high-rise residential tower. Ross Brown is asking if anyone has developed basically a maquette or visualization of an alternative, more family-centered development, or any alternative.
I think Dinu and I would both like to bring to the forefront some a previous report, and I'll leave it to Dinu to explain this in detail.
Well, I was apparently the City of Westmount and Mayor Smith has actually posted the publication of the report in 2018, as commissioned Clément Demers, who is a reputed urban planner of great impeccable record. Reputation, yes, to develop a vision for that area. And it seems the report, which is indicated as a attachment to that webpage, is now inaccessible. And it would be interesting to have it back so we could look at the recommendation. Clément Demers was part of a team and a leadership that led to the repurposing of Victoria Square into something which is as a downtown scale, of course, with a character, but also McGill Street next to it, which is quite successful. So somehow, this is the kind of intelligence people would like to have when they're discussing the future of an area of that nature. And I think it's strange that the report had disappeared.
But I think that our comment to address the question is that if that report, which is a public document, can be accessible, the answer is you will find in its pages a family-oriented scale of construction.
Yeah.
Hey, Christine is asking about Dawson's needs being incorporated into the planning, and I'm aware of at least one submission that's been made to Westmount advocating Dawson development along the south side of St. Catherine, but that's probably the subject for another program. Karen Marks entered into the chat a significant statement about sustainability we can all read together, sustainability is stated as an overriding goal of this development by densification. But a sustainable city is one that concerns itself with the quality of life and the attraction of
Yes, yes.
families.
Mhm.
So would Dinu and Julia, would you like to comment?
I think that Karen is spot on. I would like to suggest that one of the issues that we kind of have to confront is that everyone carries with them a memory map. Dinu and I, as architects, were trained in school to understand what memory maps are. They're not really absolute realities. They are how you remember areas. And one of the things that seems to me a prejudice is that many people think of Westmount as single family houses. But in fact, we have an enormous quantity of apartment buildings, 4, 5, 6 stories in height, some of them taller, but the majority of them between the 4 to 6 story height. Those are an essential part of the fabric of Westmount, and they should enter into all of our memory maps, because if we do that, we will be able to respond to Karen's discussion about sustainability and families by saying it's not going to be single family houses in this area, probably. It is 2025 now, but it can be achieved. The goals can be achieved by using another part of our housing stock, which are these apartment buildings, and seeing how they should be designed in 2025 to accommodate families. European families are raised in apartment buildings. Canadian families are apparently raised only in houses. It's time that we redeveloped our ideas of relatively 4 to 6 story buildings to encourage young families to feel at home.
Yes, and it's you speak about Canadian families and European families. What about the Montreal area families, where there's a large stock of sort of road triplexes and so on, which are a mix in between? Is there a way to improve? We have to give some confidence also to the practice of architecture to invent, architectural model that will answer that question. But the easy thing is to send the to put an elevator in an underground parking garage and then hope that this will work. It won't work, in terms of families.
Yeah.
Okay, next, the Atwater Library's Vice President, Jeff Dowd, would like you to comment on whether developers have incentives to serve the public interest as well as their own.
You mean aside from a moral incentive? What are we speaking about?
Well, he goes on to say, in this regard, is human scale densification interesting to property owners and developers interested in building up?
I have been told by numerous people in the field of development that what they seek is clarity, clear rules. Once they have clear rules, they can make money. They don't have to make money only. It's not that they can only make money by building high-rise developments. They can make money at any scale. They just need to know what the rules are.
Yeah, but Julia, we have to admit that there are different brands of developers. There are developers who feel themselves engaged in a city building mission with profitability as an aspect of it. But there are other people who are just seeking for their own ego trip on development, and they will fly away the moment it's done. So they're not building anything except towers. And the case of that Mr. Poirier was planning to install on the site of the Children the highest building in Canada, and was disturbed in his ambition by Mount Royal, and its height is really an example of that. We have, we need more of the kind of developer that build the city in a way that it's a human city and made money out of it.
There are a couple of comments about social problems, homelessness, drug, substance abuse, etc. I'm going to skip over those because they're not really the focus of this discussion, but it's all related. Roma says, as a longtime resident of Stainer Park, I know we achieve results by writing directly to and participating in meetings of the at Westmount City Hall. Would this not be helpful today? Would you like to comment?
Well, you'd have to have a forum for it. I was also a resident. I owned a house in Stainer Park and loved living there, I have to admit. I don't quite understand the question, because it is true that if we participate in meetings, we can participate in direction, but the city would have to enable those meetings to happen. And I think that the city feels that that process has closed now, at least on this topic. And if Roma is suggesting it, I think that the suggestion should be made to the city to continue the discussion. There's not an emergency on this. There needs to be further discussion.
Yeah, because the consultation has been squashed into the month around the holidays. We only found out about the LeMay's report dated November 14th. I mean, I only found out on December 6th. And yet the deadline is tomorrow.
Right, but originally it was December 31st, which was even more punishing in terms of our distractions, shall we say, by the holidays. So the extension to January 9th has given us a bit of relief. But if I could do a promo ad here, please, when we finish this discussion, go on to the city page and put your comments in. Do not consider that your civic role has been ended with this participation. It's only begun with this participation today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Perhaps I'll remind people that the cover letter that Mayor Smith posted along with the report from Clément Demers indicated that the administration welcomes the report, which was done on the basis of best practices and so on, but retains the right to do its own analysis and leads its own conclusion. So if people feel that the LeMay report or whatever comes out of this current process is inappropriate, it's important to raise that point. That the elected officers, and you know what's happening on the 2nd of November soon, municipal elections.
So that's less than a year away. Marina asks, is there a financial advantage that might explain why the city favors higher densification?
I think we could only speculate. That's a good question to ask the city council. But when you're building residential, please understand that there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure that goes with that. There's schools, there's housing, there's water and sewage and all kinds of things. So it's a difficult thing for the city to see as a cash cow. That's all I would say to you here. But I think it's a very valid question to ask the city. Has anyone done an analysis economically of what it will cost the city in terms of the infrastructure that has to be provided, and then what will be the revenue?
Okay, Vonda is asking for the link for the document about human scale development. So Dinu, if you have that at hand, if not, I can get it later and send it to Vonda.
Okay, I'll try to find it, but it's okay. Yes. Okay, I'll put it. Don't worry. I'll put it. I'll put what I have in the chat.
Yeah, Judy is expressing difficulty finding the LeMay report. I sympathize with you, Judy. It's not easy to see, but if you click on the link that's been put in the chat multiple times, you'll get on the Imagine Westmount Southeast website. And then you scroll down and the link for the report in question is on the right side. It's not easy to see, I agree. If you still can't find it, I'll send it to you later. So, Toby, have the panelists seen the 2021 revitalization study done by McGill Urban Planning for residents of the Southeast? It was widely distributed to city council members.
I have
Well, I
not
haven't.
seen it, but it would be lovely to see it. Somebody can post it. It would be great.
Yeah, Toby,
Yeah.
if you have a link at hand, please put it in the chat or
Yeah.
send me an email after, and I'll share it with Dinu and Julia.
Yeah.
Karen, the short deadline is a common tactic of politicians and developers to shut down and push back on their plans. Well said. So Dinu put the link in the chat. Um,
Yeah, there's an English page of it. I have the French version.
okay. And Frank Philpott put a link there for a document. I haven't opened it, but presumably it's useful. Okay, we still have some time left. I invite the audience to keep typing in questions. Bruce Bolton, our president of the Atwater Library, has been listening to this discussion. Bruce, I invite you to add your comments.
Well, first of all, this has been amazing. The last 45 minutes, I think we've learned more about the project as a whole and some of the consequences. It's bringing all this together that is the important thing. And what I'm pleased with is that we're taking the attitude of we want to be progressive, we want to move ahead. You know, the Atwater Library is 196 years old. And this is part of a process of making sure that we are relevant for the future.
Mhm.
And so I think what we're talking about today is dead on. So thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Bruce. Now I see another comment by Vonda. She says, note that when you leave the city a comment on their website, you'll get a thank you, but the site does not register the number of comments it receives, and in fact still says no comments have been received as yet. I commented before the original December 31st deadline, which was then extended to tomorrow, but the site still says no comments have been received. This shows unwillingness to admit people care or someone didn't program the software correctly. Well, that's interesting.
Sounds like a good question for a question period at City Council.
And there's a city council meeting next Monday evening. The Westmount City Council meeting schedule is on the city website, and the January meeting is next Monday evening. I think it starts around 6:30 or 7 o'clock. And the website invites people to submit questions for the council to address at the meeting.
Lynn, if I might just say something, I'm not a very big social media participant, but it seems to me that in most social media forum, you can see the comments by others so that you can add to it, not end up in a sort of debating match, but just basically understand the tenor of the room. I'm sort of surprised that the comments that are posted in Westmount are not publicly available to everybody to see. And I wonder why that is. That's solely a question. I'm now asking myself questions. I'm not, sorry. It's getting a little circular, but I think it's an important question as to why they are not public.
No, that's a very important thing, and it's something that it was very hard to get in the context of the City of Montreal, because there was a tradition of closed door and dark rooms decision. And if you look at the OCPM, the Office de Consultation Publique, now for every case, there is a proper library of information available to citizens with background material so that the exercise is truly enriching for everybody, including the developer. And transparency is key, and it's not something to be suspicious about. It's actually the lack of it which creates suspicions and distraction that are useless.
Okay, the last two Zoom comments. Margaret, I hope this situation will be resolved with the citizens' needs put forefront.
Mm.
The current iteration of the library in any neighborhood is vital and more important to community cohesion than the mall, the cinema, most else but schools, which are few and far between for children in the area. Thank you, Margaret. And then the last word goes to the Atwater Library Vice President. Can our presenters offer examples of successful human scale densification in other places?
Dinu, do you want to start?
Well, I mean, I'm maybe I sound a little insular, but I think we have good examples just on the island of Montreal. We can use the bus system to visit them. Go to Angus Shop. Go to many of the industrial sites we had along the Lachine Canal densified. Many of them have taken approach of reknitting. Some are not successful, but there's a lot to learn from just strolling around.
Mm.
You know, now they're exercising Lachine on the old Dominion Bridge site, which might be of interest also, mixing a blend of industrial heritage with proper scale development, you know, and mixed use and so on. There are plenty of lessons to be learned from what we have around. It doesn't stop us from looking around, but further. But
I would also say to you that this sparks as a kind of sidebar on this, and brings me back to my statement of the word generic. The city, that area of the city has a number of significant heritage buildings. The Atwater Library is obviously at the forefront of it. But we have other former bank buildings, former industrial buildings, all along St. Catherine Street. They don't seem to have been taken into account at all in this study. The study assumes, certainly on St. Catherine Street, if you look at the proposal for these evenly spaced towers, of a completely generic, wipe the whole street down to 0.0 and rebuild again. And I think that Dinu and I could spend another hour and a half, and that's not meant to terrify you all, discussing projects across North America where heritage buildings are integrated into the fabric of new construction and provide not only a benchmark of knowability to the people who are in that area, but enrich the end result. And so, you know, we could do another, maybe we need to start doing some more Zoom conversations. If anything came out of the pandemic that we should be happy about, it is definitely the Zoom idea of meeting and talking and conversing.
Thank you. So I invite each of you, Dinu and Julia, to do a short final statement, and then I'll make a couple of administrative announcements. Dinu.
Short doesn't seem to be part of my vocabulary, but I'll try. I think it would be interesting that every comment is made on two levels. One is what is precious and not to be changed. The second is what is the vision for the area. And what is questionable here is perhaps more the vision. And this issue, putting the family as an indicator of success. What will be the success of the plan is how this will be in 25 years from now, not on the eve of election day.
Julia.
So sign in your comments.
I agree with Dinu that what we are unhappy about is the vision. We're not unhappy about the idea of redeveloping this area. I think all of us have been yearning for that since, frankly, the destruction of the 60s. So it's been 60 years now. It's time to do something, but we need to do it according to a vision that will really be non-generic, will really be family-oriented, and will really reknit this part of the city into something that belongs, frankly, to Westmount, as Dinu spoke of boundaries and borders. But will at the same time be very modern, very contemporary, and very walkable and livable and happy. That's what I think we're all looking for. And I don't think we are convinced that we have in any way got that yet. And so we are asking, begging you, I think there are about 150 of you now still on the call, send in your comments to the city. The deadline is tomorrow, right, Lynn?
Yes.
Deadline is tomorrow. The time is not given. I was joking that when my students have to submit a paper on a deadline, I always say 11:59 p.m. of that day is the deadline for it. They don't say that, but I would urge you to get it in there before 5 p.m. tomorrow. Please do it. It's so important.
Yes.
And you don't have to write an essay, just one eloquent, punchy sentence, and please mention the Atwater Library. Okay, this session has been recorded, and we will post it on the Atwater Library's YouTube channel. On the Atwater Library website homepage, at the bottom right, bottom left, is the red icon for our YouTube channel. Also, we will record the text of today's Zoom chat, everything that everyone typed in, and you can keep typing. If any of you want more information, want clarification, you're welcome to email me, lverge@outwaterlibrary.ca. We've had a record high response to this event, even though there was only a few days notice. So that's a clear indication that a lot of people share our concern about what's at stake for the Atwater Library and share our desire for everything that the Atwater Library has to offer the community, a beautiful heritage building that's been tastefully conserved and updated and made accessible over the past few years with all the activities that go on here. We welcome everyone. We need to be nurtured and supported. It's not easy being a not-for-profit with no government core funding. We need support from our municipal government, and we're contributing. So let us contribute. Plan to embrace everything that we do and can do. We're now raising money to start our 3rd century. So thank you all for your concern, your support, and in particular, thank you, Dinu and Julia, for for generously sharing your expertise and being public in your strong advocacy. We're really, really grateful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
And Happy New Year.
Thanks for the library. Yes.
Yes.
Thanks for the library for being more than a silent place to read. It's a place to speak from.
Yeah, we're much more than that. And next week, our lunchtime series event is Zoom only again. It's on our usual Thursday. And the topic is Canadian history. We're hosting the author of award-winning books on the history of the building of the Canadian Pacific Railway and the history of the Hudson's Bay Company. So it'll be really interesting. I hope many of you will be back. Thanks.
Thank you. Happy
Bye.
New Year to all. And don't forget to write your report. Bye.